All right. Welcome, everyone, to our November webinar series, Future Trend Fridays, where we're breaking down 3 trends that we think you should be paying attention to and creating plans as you're looking at 2025 campaign and content strategy. I'm Nicole McLean, Head of Marketing and Sales here at Composely, and really excited to be joined with Kate Super from PrimePay. Kate, welcome.
Nicole, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am also very excited. I know it's going to be such a great webinar and tons of great actionable insights. Before we dive in, just a few housekeeping items. Everyone in the audience is on auto mute. So like I said, please use that chat and the Q&A feature. I'll be keeping an eye on it. We also are recording today's webinar, so please feel free to take your own notes, but we will be sending a copy of the recording to everyone later today or first thing Monday morning, so keep an eye on your inbox for that. And then I always like to say this, but Kate and I are working from home. This is not a background, if you can't tell. So if there's any weird technical things, dogs barking, technology snafus, just bear with us and we'll get back to it. But with that, Kate, welcome again. Kate heads up content for PrimePay, and we had the opportunity to meet a couple months ago, and I was so struck by your content strategy and your ability to articulate a very clear content strategy, but was very clear that you want to focus on authoritative content, integrating SMEs, making sure that there's, that quality over quantity. And I talk about your content strategy a lot with other people, but have been looking for the right opportunity to have you on. And of course, the little authority play on words here, we knew that this would be the perfect opportunity to have you on. So welcome and thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for that compliment. I hope I don't let you down by talking about this today.
I am sure you will not. As we get started, though, I love just to kind of always like to have a fun intro question just to kind of get us into the webinar. And I'll stop sharing screen here, but we are officially in Thanksgiving season here in the US. I know it's after Halloween. I know there's another fun holiday at the end of the year, but I want to give Thanksgiving its due. So could you share a favorite Thanksgiving food or a favorite tradition that you like to celebrate?
I love that you're giving Thanksgiving its due. It is my favorite holiday, that and 4th of July, because the food is so good. Um, I have a huge sweet tooth, and so of course I'm going to say pie. I make a really good sweet potato pie. And I
Mm.
also have a tip. A lot of people say, look up what to do with leftovers. I make homemade cranberry sauce, and that actually makes a really good pie filling the day or two after. It's tart, it's sweet, it has
Yes.
orange zest in it. So I recommend doing that if you have any leftover cranberry sauce.
Wow, already bringing the tips. I would have never thought of that as a pie filling, but it makes complete sense, and that sounds amazing. I think that is a good foreshadowing for I know an example about recipes. So maybe after you might have to share that recipe with our audience.
Maybe.
Um, okay, we've got 25 minutes on the clock, lots to dive into. We've heard a lot over the last year, helpful content, EEAT, bring authority. And I feel like a lot of people say it, but when you actually try to put it into practice, I feel like a lot of times we fall back to the same principles that maybe don't really have that authoritative content. To level set for the audience today, what is authoritative content for you? And how do you know it when you say it? How do you know if you're creating that authoritative content?
For me, authoritative content really leans into that thought leadership piece. I want my content to either give an opinion or people leave with an opinion afterwards or a call to action. If
Mm.
I am because authoritative content takes way longer to write than just a straight SEO piece of content or produce. And so when people leave, like I said, I want them to have a CTA. And the last thing I want is for them to think, what now? Or even worse, so what? And so one of the ways I really lean into that is by using personal quotes, by using data, by using real life examples. And I think that the easiest way to think about authoritative content is to actually look at it from the user's point of view. And so I'll give a fun example, which is that you may have picked up that I love to bake. And so one year I was hosting Easter and I wanted to make the best carrot cake. So I typed that into Google, and of course, pages upon pages pop up. And I start clicking and I realize it's just a lot of blogs saying that they have the best. Here's the recipe. And it just felt, as the reader, very self-serving. How do I really know that it's the best? I'm not going to do all these practice. I don't have time to do all these practice cakes.
Right.
Then I landed on this website. I don't know if you've heard it. It's called Pancake Princess.
Yep.
She is very data driven. She takes the top 10 recipes on the internet. She trains all of her friends how to be taste testers and what to look for. She uses the same ingredients, same cooking environment, and they rank. And then at the very end, she uses data. She gives real quotes. She gives personalized recommendations, like if you like raisins in yours, use this one.
Mhm.
And while we're not all writing about cake or fun things like that, the takeaway is, as a reader, after reading her content, I was like, this is authoritative. I trust not only this brand, but what she's telling me. And now I feel like I can make an informed decision moving forward.
Well, and you have that trust off of one blog post. It didn't necessarily have to be this consistent year-long built brand impression. That was one blog post that was just really well written that
Made
clearly
it
has stuck
work
with
for
you.
me. Yeah.
Yes. So then how as marketers, you said quotes, data. Again, these are a lot of things we all like to have or want to have access to, but when you really try to execute that strategy, it's a hard strategy to execute.
Yes, it is.
And I'm sure
Yes.
it takes a lot more time than just like, let's throw a prompt into Chat GPT and get a blog post out and we're good to go.
For sure.
How should marketers think about getting this data and having this library of quotes and even it sounds like almost a methodology to authoritative content?
I adore that you just used the word library because I hadn't even thought about this. But what I do is when I'm reading something interesting, I actually, instead of bookmarking it, because if I bookmark it, I will never go back to it. I
Sure.
have a running document that has different sections about topics, and I'm basically making an annotated bibliography. I go in every quarter and
Brilliant.
update it to make sure that content is still up to date, that data is still up to date, but I have my go-to. So if I'm ever writing something about DEIB, employee experience, I'm going to do my research, but I also have some fallback resources that I can look at. To make sure that you are writing something interesting or with a unique perspective, one, you have to think it's interesting. So, what interests you as a writer? Is it the data? Is it storytelling? And really lean into that. The second way to know if it's unique is you have to know what else is out there. So, and I think that that's one of the time sucks of writing this authoritative content is you have to consume everyone else's content about it to make sure that you're just not spending all this time pushing out the same exact thing. You need to figure out your spin on it.
To that point, I talk a lot about this in various content we produce, webinars, podcasts, etc. But this idea of like where you are in the market. Are you a category creating? Are you a category creator? That's a lot of alliteration. Are you trying to catch up? Are you last to market, but maybe have a really interesting take on things? Do you feel like you have to be an innovator in order to, or innovating in the space in order to bring an authoritative perspective to content?
Do you have to be an innovator? I don't think so. However, you need to come at a topic in a different way. So, a few people know this. I used to be a high school English teacher. And so I would read 120 essays on The Great Gatsby, but no essay was the same because people are
Mm.
using the same exact text, but they're putting their own unique perspective on it. Even if they're using the same quote, even if they're pulling the same data, we all have our own unique experiences. And you just need, as a content creator, to find out what your company's unique experience is. Or it may be even a personality play. Maybe your company has a really fun and quirky personality, and that can really live in the content and feel different to the reader or user.
Yeah, I love that analogy is to think about like essays. Yes, in high school, I mean, everyone's talking, you're using the same source material, but that doesn't mean it all has to be very cookie cutter unless you are like, unless you're using an AI with no human
Exactly.
spin, unless you're just looking at keywords and trying to duplicate what's already out there and replicate versus come at it with a unique perspective or figuring out how to make it different to
Exactly.
you.
And I'd love to kind of stand up on my soapbox for a minute and talk about AI
Yes.
because
Let's
AI
go.
does a lot of great things for us. I feel like maybe 4 years ago, people in the content world were like, no, we're not going to use AI. And now it's just a thing that we do. However,
You're almost looked down upon. If you're like, I don't use AI, it's like, what are you
right,
doing?
you're not as savvy as you could be.
Yes.
The issue is when people use AI to source quotes and to source data and then don't try to find the original source. Because what we're finding now is that AI is pulling this data that may be old, it's pulling quotes and then rewording it so you're not plagiarizing. And we all know what happens when you reword data or you reword quotes is it can misconstrue the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, you've tried to create something authoritative and it's actually done the opposite. It's knocked you down a peg. So just a warning to people, you can use it as a jumping off point, but make sure you do your due diligence.
Well, and this isn't a soapbox. This is maybe a hot take. We're in future trends. So hot take of
Okay.
a sub trend is I think as we start to use AI, someone being a really good editor, I think is going to become a more important skill set over the next few years than being a writer. Not saying that writing is not important. I mean, obviously, Capozzi is a writing company. Writing is incredibly important. But as you're trying to use ChatGPT, you need to have a really good editing lens going through that and being skeptical and really knowing like the basics and the foundation of things to know if it's BSing you or not.
Yes, side note, if anyone knows a professional development on how to edit ChatGPT things, because it's hard, because
It is.
a few years ago you would just circle and say, this is AI. Well, now, how do you give that advice? It may look like this doesn't fit our personality. This seems a little robotic, but I'd love in the future if anyone knows any tips, please send them to me because I'm always trying to learn.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I mean, the unfortunate thing is we now see people who are human writing, but it sounds AI because AI learned from us. It learned from the overused leverage, ensure, navigating
Landscape.
words, landscape. Oh my gosh. Yep. I was quick side note, maybe we'll include it in follow-up, but we just released one of our podcast episodes earlier this week with our chief editor, who does do a lot of playing around with AI and trying to stay up to date on what's happening there. And she gave a running list of like tried and true AI words. Lifeblood was one that I was very
Oh,
surprised, but she's like, it's gotten a little better. She's like, when we were first testing these tools, everything had lifeblood in it, which
hmm. And that's a shame
sure
too, that now these
it
words,
is.
even if they're used naturally, just don't feel like it anymore.
It doesn't. And it is going to challenge us as marketers and writers to level up and look at new and interesting ways. It's so easy to fall back on, ensure like use best practices to ensure blah blah blah. And we're going to be navigating this new landscape of uncertainty. I mean, we all laugh. It's the buzziest buzzwords, out there, but that is also, I think, okay, do you have a really unique tone of voice? If you have a really strong tone of voice, you're not going to fall back on those words quite as much.
Exactly. And I would make sure that you actually have a document that not only explains your tone of voice, but I like to make ones like good, better, best, and then like an absolutely
Mm,
not. Um, and we send it to people who guest write as well.
yeah,
It keeps everything aligned.
absolutely. That is actually a great mini promo for our third webinar in the series where we are going to be talking about how to scale with third-party resources and things that you should have internally to help make that better. And that I know we'll definitely talk about that documentation. Okay, this is one question that I've really struggled with as a marketer over the last decade in various careers as you're going in and out of industries. But do you think that the marketer, whether it's the VP of marketing to a content creator, do they need to be the SME in your space in order to create good content?
I mean, it sure as heck helps, right?
I mean, it helps a lot, yes, but that's a
Um,
big ask.
yeah, I mean, it helps because you know what resources to look at, you know how to get the conversation started, you probably know other people to reach out to. Um, but everyone has to start somewhere. I've been writing about the HR and people space for years. I didn't always know about it except my own experience emailing HR. Um, while I think being an SME helps, I definitely want to emphasize that as a writer, your subject matter experience will never recreate like a boots on the ground person. So it's really important to still interview people. And I also want you to think about, once again, that authoritativeness. As a reader and as the Google gods, they really care about titles. And so, what sounds better to a reader if I'm writing about HR? Content marketer or the author title of head of people? Head of people immediately. And so, you really want to make sure that you're getting their input as well, making sure one, it's accurate in 2024, 2025, but also they probably know things in their day to day that you haven't even thought of.
Absolutely. I mean, I can think through, I actually started my career in the HR space as well. It's part of why Kate and I first connected. And yeah, I mean, I was a 22-year-old, would have absolutely no boots on the ground experience in HR. But after 5.5 years, you learn a lot if you want to, if you go on that quest to understand, talk to customers and learn your target market, you can build that. And then I went from HR into water quality. And I fell right back down, knew absolutely nothing. And it is really challenging. And I think marketers, I think there's a great opportunity because to point, most times subject matter experts are terrible writers. They are great. They could be great speakers or they are great at explaining something really niche, but that doesn't mean it's interesting. It doesn't mean that it's in they're going to put it in the right format for the right
Right. It
audience at
might
the right
not be
time.
digestible for your audience.
Thank you. That is a much better way of saying it. Um, but you as a marketer need to know how to get that information and then translate it. And I think interviewing has also become a bit of a lost skill, a lost art. Um,
I
but
love
it's
interviews.
really important. I do too.
I love it. And if you're uncomfortable with it, practice, practice, practice. You know, interview nice people at first. They'll hold your hand and help you. I have never walked away from an interview with like less than 4 pages of information, most of which wasn't even about the original topic. They'll just say something, and I'm like, wait, that's so good. Like, let me write it down because now I have another content idea and I want to talk to you later about that. It's just, it's such, it's just so worthwhile. You are really missing out if you are emailing questions back and forth. It really, um, you get the most out of talking to someone, interviewing them.
You do. And I think that's where video can be super helpful. And again, we'll talk about that. That is a trend that we're seeing, but stuff like this where you can take it and you're getting a authoritative, interesting perspective from someone like Kate, who is an authority in our space, who is a leading content marketer. Now we have this information, we can transcribe it, we can ask ChatGPT to help repurpose it, but you're not asking ChatGPT to come up with the information. Um, and so I think that interviewing piece again can help you like it's all about where you put your time. And I think that's a great transition to, one of the topics we want to speak through is like optimizing for SEO, optimizing for thought leadership. Can you do it all in one? I think it's just really about where you put your time and finding whether it's third-party resources, it's tools like a Chat GPT or a Claude, it's an internal resource. Where can you put your time to get the biggest bang for your buck and then let other things take care of it? I think interviewing is one of those. I think editing is a skill that you need to learn. Um, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about like the SEO. I don't think you guys have given up on SEO
We have
just
not.
because authority is at the center of what you're focused on.
We have actually created a whole new section on our website. It's a learn section dedicated to
Yeah.
SEO and what I call grab and go content. Um, we really wanted to create a really great user experience on our website. I work for PrimePay, which is an HR and payroll software company. And last year, we had webinars in one place, SEO content in another place, thought leadership in another, and it was just we weren't seeing we weren't creating this bingeable experience for our readers. And so we created a resource hub, and that way it really puts in my mind one content market strategy with SEO on one side and authoritative on the other. Now, they can be the same, but we're quickly finding out that Google doesn't always play nice with authoritative content.
Just so it goes against what they say
Darn them.
they want.
So, you can optimize if it's gated, you can optimize your landing page, you can do a lot
Mhm.
with your header, all the SEO things. However, so we just put out 2 new research papers this fall. It was very important for us that this was authoritative content. And while we would have loved it to be picked up in the SEO world, that wasn't the point. And so my tip for people, if they're trying to balance SEO and authoritative content, is to create really 2 sets of OKRs, because the OKRs that apply to your SEO related content probably aren't going to be the same as your authoritative content. Because for authoritative, you're going to have to plan to distribute it in different ways. Newsletters, social, email cadences, video, all the things. And so that your OKRs might look like downloads or click-through rates and things like that, versus your SEO goals may be, keyword, traffic volume, things like that. So I don't want you to think that how do I say this? If you are tying your authoritative content to SEO standards, you're going to be really sad.
Mm.
You need to figure out, what is the point? Why are you creating this authoritative piece? Brand awareness, to be a thought leader in the space. And that doesn't always translate into keywords. It may translate into moving the needle on your pipe gen or things like that. So to really consider when you're creating your goals, that they may look 2 different ways.
Yeah, I think that's important. Also, some like internal education is if your VP doesn't necessarily understand that, or your CEO, depending on size of the org and where you're reporting into, just that education piece of different contents needed in different spots. A really good organic piece may not be what sales needs to help move people through the pipeline. And you have to look at both. I do think though that from what I've seen, maybe that authoritative piece itself is not ranking, but you're adding to your domain authority, which could help your keyword piece rank. That's really hard to report on. Maybe nearly impossible to report
Right.
that, like, hey, we wrote these 2 really great reports. And also over the last 6 months, we've seen this other stuff uptick as well. Like it's hard to correlate those actions, but we do know that it has impact.
Yes.
Um,
And
and then
that's a great point.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was,
go
I was going
ahead.
to say that our 2 research reports had to do with the employee experience, and we worked really hard on building out this employee experience cluster on our website. And so we saw that interaction on like across the website. And while it was hard to track exactly that uptick happened, because like in the back of our mind, we're like, we launched at this date, we started seeing. So as a marketer, you have to create a story. And
Yes.
so,
Yes,
we
you
did.
have to market yourselves too. We always kind of forget we have to do that. But there are some things that I'm seeing folks do, or that I would recommend, when people come to us and say, okay, how can I really make sure what are things that I can be doing to help improve our content? I think one, it doesn't have to be in the CMS, but I think it also just helps with user experience. If you have something that's like big idea, big tip, in like something that kind of calls out in a blog post, and that's where you're making sure that is a unique thing, that is your company's perspective on whatever the topic and keywords are. If you can have one really solid of those, a blog post that none of the other blog posts have, I think that's an easy way to add it in. And then again, I'm spoiling a little bit for next week, but we have seen folks that are marrying video content with a blog post on the same topic, 90 seconds. This is a little bit of the Google gods, but Google bought YouTube. So if it is hosted on YouTube and you're embedding it on your blog, again, that's showing off hopefully an authoritative perspective, but it's just kind of building on the keywords. we've seen that work too. So I think it's the actual pieces need different OKRs, but then this is what's hard. And you do need like almost that mad scientist. I think of that meme from, I think it's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but it came out from Stranger Things, but it's that guy and he has like a board of
Yep.
string and stuff. It's like, that is your content strategy. You have this benchmark report, but then how are you taking really juicy pieces of that and putting it into the cluster of employee experience on your different blog posts so that you're kind of ranking it as well. But just the blog, but just that unique benchmark report is not suddenly going to unlock SEO
Right.
rankings. You know, it has to be layered on top of each other.
And something you just said made me think of two things, which is one, as we've talked about, it takes more time to create authoritative content. So you really want to get all that you can out of it.
Yes, great point.
Create those videos, create the Q&As, create whatever, infographics, like really squeeze out everything you can, and use those quotes for the future. And then the second is video. It's, we're not just, of course, we want to rank better, but we also need to think people now consume content really differently. And so, I'm someone, if I'm sent a video, I'm not going to watch it, but send me an article, I'll read it. My
Yes.
husband's the exact opposite. And so we want to make sure, because we're delivering such good content, we want to make sure that it's accessible to all of our readers and viewers.
Yeah, and I actually think that was a lesson I learned from the my time in employee experience is that we always used to say like you have to meet the employee where they are. You have to engage them. This is now going a slight leadership tangent, but you have to understand their personality, how they consume information, how they process. You have to meet them where they are. It's not that they have to meet the company where they are. But I took that so much as a marketing lesson
Mhm.
as well. It is not your consumer's responsibility to meet you where your content is. It's you have to go to them. And that often is a multi-channel, omni-channel approach.
Great point.
Okay, we have just a few minutes, which I told
Okay.
you 30 minutes would fly. We
Whew.
could
Yeah.
probably keep talking about this forever. So please, if you have a question, drop it in the chat, drop it in Q&A. I have a couple more to wrap up, but I'm also going to put Kate's LinkedIn in the chat again. Please connect with her. I follow her on LinkedIn and love to follow along on what you guys are putting out. I'll also you guys will get an email, but we do have another one of these next Friday. We will be diving into video, so would love to have you on that as well. So if it's not on your calendar, make sure it is, and you'll get a registration link on that if you haven't signed up yet. But a very kind of tactical question to end, because I do think this is the dream state, this is the vision a lot of us want to have. But how do you actually go and work with subject matter experts in the organization or help people understand that they are? That's the thing I've always found is some people don't realize they're an SME and you're like, no, you are. I need you to be part of the journey of creating this content. Like, how do you work cross collaboratively in order to actually find these awesome nuggets to include in your content?
You're right. A lot of people are humble and you gotta flatter them. Like, because I mean, honestly, because they live it every day, they don't understand that no one else knows this anymore if they've been doing it for years. But I have three quick strategies on leveraging those internal relationships. Um, First would be like for executives, like have an opening email explaining the whole point of this. Because most likely this isn't going to be a one and done conversation. It's going to be a partnership that extends. And so in that email, you're almost setting up a program and it's saying how their insight is going to help you as the writer, how it's going to help the company, how it's going to help them. In that email, I make sure to set expectations, whether it's I'm going to be reaching out to you once a quarter, and then this is how the process looks. And then it's critical that you ask them to respond. Because if you don't do that, you're just assuming that they read it, and then your timelines may get mixed up or things might not work out. And I would much rather an executive say, no, I actually just have too much on my plate than trying to coordinate something with them.
Mhm.
The second piece of advice I have is when you are interviewing someone the week before, a few days before, send them just a few questions in a doc. 25% of the time they'll look at it. but it helps you when, especially if it's remote, to go, share it on your screen, go through. The conversation's going to go elsewhere, but it really helps ground the both of you to make sure that you're answering what you need for this specific piece of content.
Mhm.
And then third, and underline this if you're taking notes, set way more time than you think you need because
Ooh.
things come up and meetings are moved. And the last thing you want is to be, nudging your CFO or something saying, hey, I need you to help me write this blog post.
Mhm.
That is not on their top 10 to-do list. And you don't want missed schedules or just, things come up. You don't want that to hurt your goal setting and your whole content calendar. So I try to give like weeks of wiggle room.
Okay.
It
That's
happens.
really smart.
So like once again, a good, better, best timeline.
Yes, if we can beat it, that's great. But worst case, we're now not going over. My tip here, which I've always found, is they don't realize they're SMEs, but build a relationship with your delivery team. Whether it's a CSM, account manager, whatever you're calling those folks, but they are talking to your customers every day. They have the use cases, they are hearing what's going on in the world of your team. And they will not think of themselves as SMEs in the space because they think of themselves as CSMs and client advocates, and they absolutely are. But as a marketer, I've learned more and become more of a subject matter expert in my industry by being close with my CSMs and hearing what's going on with their customers than almost anyone else in the business. So that's kind of a sneaky way. Listen to those client calls, build a relationship with your counterpart in the CS world. And they also like to be able to shout out their customers and share those stories too. And it's great when you can kind of mash like customer success wins with actual interesting, authoritative, to use our word today, learnings into one piece, which is always great.
That's a great tip too. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, we are over time, which I knew would happen. But Kate, thank you so much. Honestly, I have a page of notes myself. I always love when I can walk away with some really interesting ideas. Your Kate's LinkedIn is in the chat, but we'll also be including it in the follow-up email. So please connect with her. And we hope to see you next Friday as we talk with Lindsay McGuire, who leads content and events at Goldcast. And we're going to talk about video and how that should work into your strategy. But Kate, thank you again so much. So excited to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, have a great weekend.
Take care.
Bye bye.